Okay, hey, I'm back for another Gruul mirror. I added a video this time because I thought that there's a lot of paused screens, so you could have something to look to when it's a paused screen for like 5 minutes. Let's go. So I open up this hand, and I have an interesting option on turn one. I'm on the draw, so I gotta draw my card first. Okay. So basically, I can choose to either play the Kazandu mammoth on turn one, or I can try and hold it. So I have to think quickly about the pros and cons. I also have the information that my opponent played a mountain. That would most likely mean they're playing a Gruul deck. Most higher stakes tournaments are open deck lists, but not every single tournament is, like on Magic Online. So let's break down quickly the pros and cons. So I currently have, if I played Kazandu Mammoth on turn one, I have 4 lands in my hand. That means that if I drew more lands, I wouldn't have a ton to do with them, because I mostly want to operate on like 4 to 5 lands this game. Obviously, it fluctuates game to game. I'm just talking about the context of this hand. This hand, I have a Bonecrusher, I have a couple of Akroan Wars, I have an Cleave, and I have 3 lands in the Kazandu Mammoth. So if I draw extra lands, it won't be that helpful. Obviously, it could help me in the stage of the game, like if I want to spend 5 mana on one turn or so on. But I mean just in the context of this starting hand. So I thought a little bit here about which to play. I ended up thinking that, okay, so yeah, if I draw extra lands, it might not be that useful for me. So maybe I want to play Kazandu Mammoth, because also if I draw spells, I can just cast them in the meantime. Because most of my spells in my deck are cheap, so I could cast them. Like just most spells in the Gruul deck, you can cast off 3 lands. And I also thought that what am I trying to say? Akroan War can help you catch up tempo if you maybe miss a turn to play it or whatever. But I think it's pretty important to not stumble too much. I already have a pretty good curve here, actually, because I can play this on 2. I don't have to, but I have the potential curve to play this on 2, play the Bonecrusher on 3, play an Akroan War, then I could play an Cleave or another Akroan War. I'm also going to draw like 4 or 5 cards by this time, and having 5-6 lands could actually be useful, so I could move around the Cleave, or if I draw Scavenging Ooze or randomly, cards that I want to double spell, like I might want to go Stomp Bonecrusher, Lovestruck Beast, or play an Innkeeper, or whatever. So in this situation, I ended up playing the fetch land on turn 1, and obviously the way the game's going to play out, you'll see that it would be much better if I played the Mammoth on turn 1. I'm not trying to be results-oriented. When I was watching the replay, I didn't even remember the game completely, and I immediately was like, I kind of wish I played the Mammoth. Again, the instant logic I had was, I can't really use extra lands if I draw them. I can just play the Mammoth, because, like, let's say I draw another, like, I can cast most creatures I draw, so then I could just cast the Bonecrusher, and then I could cast another creature and play the Mammoth tapped, and then a Akroan War makes up the tempo. So actually, it could have been better to hold the Mammoth. Basically, I was thinking, like, let's say I don't draw lands, well, then I can cast a spell, and then on turn 4, because I play this on turn 2, I play this on turn 3, or whatever if I draw another spell, and then if I miss on lands, I can play another 3-drop and play the Mammoth. And this way, it helps me have a better ratio of perhaps lands to spells by waiting and doing this. But there's also downsides too, and it depends how important you think it is to cast a Akroan War. Akroan War is not a card that it's easy to evaluate exactly when you want to cast it. It's not easy to exactly evaluate what impact it's going to have on the game, how it's going to swing the race when both players have Cleaves and access to cards like Akroan War. And it's not that my opponent would cast it, but it's just like, I don't know exactly how a Cleave race could break down, because there's a lot of small variables that could affect it, such as just how many Fabled Passage, exactly their curve. Obviously you could actually just break down the math and try and see turn by turn exactly how an Cleave fight would break down, and like how important it is to cast a Akroan War at exactly what time, and so on and so forth. But basically, I meant to say it's kind of hard to know exactly how easy it is to win by just casting these Akroan Wars if, like, maybe I flood and maybe or not flood because I have so much to do with my mana, but I'm trying to find the words like akroan war is it's kind of like a active treason that lasts several turns that also wipes your opponent's boards. So that means on some states it's I mean it's pretty effective now because I have Ember Cleave, but it could be kind of like you could end up in a position where you cast a Akroan War, but then you can't do enough with their creature, and they just end up getting their creature back, and they do enough with the permanents in play, where your Akroan War might not accomplish enough, and you might want to cast other spells. Though maybe that's wrong. It's kind of hard to find the words. Akroan War is a very complicated card. Yeah, so they play Brushfire. I fetch. I get the Mountain because I have the Pathway. If you're in Keeper or immediately, I remember I was feeling some guttural response regret. So let me try and get back to right before I played my land that turn. That went too fast. So yeah, you could. I thought it was pretty clear to stomp, but if you feel like you have reasons not to, you can not. But again, I don't really want to like if they could play Ooze and eat it, but I don't want to like if they play Fable Passage mess around and take like not even be able to cast my stomp. Like if they play Fable Passage, it's just a disaster. I can't even play my stomp. So there you go. That's why I thought that's pretty important. So here's kind of interesting. They play Shatterskull tapped and pass. So now this is my draw step. I draw Bonecrusher, and it's pretty interesting. So they played a Shatterskull and didn't play any spell on their main phase, which is kind of interesting because if they were flooded, they might be inclined to hold Shatterskull. Maybe they have more Shatterskulls in hand, but if you read, they didn't have a play because maybe they have quite a poor draw and they're flooded. Maybe Shatterskull's not the land they want to play. Maybe that means that they have expensive spells in hand, right? And they're just trying to set it up and not take too much damage before they cast those spells, like Akroan War, Vivian, stuff like that. Questing Beast. It could mean they could have a Lovestruck Beast because, for example, like let's say they have Lovestruck Beast, but they also have a Fire Prophecy, which is reasonable. A lot of people main deck round 2. I was main decking round 2 for a while. I might even start doing it again, maybe again. And maybe they're like, well, what's the point of playing? Maybe it's important they make the 1/1 because they don't have Great Henge to take advantage of the 5/5. They might not just want to play the 5/5. And they might say, okay, I want to play it on turn 4 where I can go Heart's Desire and the Lovestruck in the same turn. And they might have Stomp up or Fire Prophecy up and just be like, I don't really care about casting it as a Heart's Desire. Obviously, they could make a Heart's Desire token, pay 3 life, pass with Stomp up, because then they could have the out to draw Innkeeper, and then they could draw a card off the Lovestruck Beast. But they might not value 3 life. They also might not think that's true completely. And like think of that advantage, and so that's why it's within reason that I think they could have like a Lovestruck Beast in their hand, even though they didn't play it, basically. And that's why I also feel like it's pretty likely they could have a Stomp or a Fire Prophecy. Or they could also just have expensive spells, especially because of the fact that they played Shatterskull tapped, which would imply that it would make it less likely that their hand was just a ton of lands. So I want to try and break down what their hand could be to inform my play. So I drew Bonecrusher for turn, and again, here you can really see I'm starting to get punished for not playing the Mammoth on turn 1. You could say it's results oriented because I drew 2 spells and mana intense spells at that in the meantime. But on turn 1, I kind of tried to break it down, though it's hard to break it down completely because Akroan War is a complicated card of how it impacts the game and what's the most relevant plays to make before it to put yourself in the best spot to win. So yeah, I have a few options here. I can play Kazandu Mammoth tapped and pass with Stomp up. I could play an Innkeeper, but I don't really like that because I can just sneak in the Innkeeper on most turns anyway and not just play into a Stomp, which my other creatures wouldn't die to Stomp. I could play Mammoth, but I don't really like that because I kind of really want to get access to these 4-drops. I could play a Bonecrusher and pass. And then it's kind of complicated because basically I remember here I thought there was a decent chance they might have Questing Beast, and I thought if I played Bonecrusher then I could be protected from a Questing Beast in a way, whereas if I play Kazandu Mammoth I might pass, do nothing, fall behind on board, take 4 from the Questing Beast. Though looking back, I don't think fearing Questing Beast made that much sense since I had 2 Akroan Wars, and I could have just taken 4 from the Questing Beast, played this tap, next turn played Innkeeper, Bonecrusher. Then if they played any other creatures, I could Akroan War their Questing Beast, steal it, and then the other creature I could block with the Questing Beast, and I have an Ember Cleave and a second Akroan War to help win a race. Looking back, I think the best play was probably to play Kazandu Mammoth tapped and pass, especially since it's Fire Prophecy is one of the more likely spells. Also, I wanted to add that if they had bonecrusher, there's a good chance they would just cast it and not pass with stomp up, because it's pretty good to cast. And passing with stomp ups, like, you don't have to do that. And I could just cast a bonecrusher, and then they might regret not casting their own bonecrusher. So that means that it's more likely that they maybe have Fire Prophecies than Stomp, even though Stomp is a card people play more. Looking back, yeah, I would play the Mammoth Tap because I don't really fear the immediate Questing Beast that much. You could also think about stuff like turn 5 Vivian, but it's kind of fringe because people usually don't main deck them, maybe 1 or 2. Also, and warping your whole play around that seems kind of fringe. And also, I think other thing is if I spend my turn playing Bonecrusher, it sets up my future turns kind of poorly, because then I don't have a good play for next turn setup. Whereas if I play Kazandu Mammoth, my hands will have 4 drops and I can just start casting 4 drops. Anyway, I ended up deciding to play the Bonecrusher. Not a play I think I would do again, but I went for it here. They ended up playing Cycle Wilt. Makes sense as a card they could have. And I might have considered doing it main phase. It's kind of interesting they didn't do it main phase. It might give them more information on their lands, but obviously they could pass for a lot of reasons. They could bluff a Stomp, they could have a Stomp, they could have a Fire Prophecy, whatever. But again, they could also just cast the... This thing about Stomp and Fire Prophecy is that they might have just Fire Prophecy my Bonecrusher, very likely. And if they had a Stomp, they might have just cast the Bonecrusher. So they maybe could have cycled the Wilt main phase, but I don't know. Anyway, so maybe they wanted to keep it depending on what I do. If I don't do anything, I don't know. So they play... Yeah, this is what they play this turn, and now it's my turn. So I got Shadow Skull. Okay. There's no way to pause in between because it's just, as you can see, too quick. I would have to do like something specific. Anyway, so I have a few options. I have Shadow Skull in my hand, and the main plays I could do is I could choose to Stomp their Innkeeper. And well, obviously, I would probably want to play like after I choose what spell to cast. I would probably attack before casting a spell. But before I attack or not attack, I want to think my turns through and which spell I want to cast. What I mean to say is I'm not probably going to like cast a spell and then attack. But before I go to attacks, I want to think what spell I'm going to cast so I know how I want to attack. Because I might want to attack with open mana so that they can't just like double block my creature. Okay. So now that that's out of the way, I basically have 2 main options here, which I can cast Stomp, I could cast Innkeeper, Bonecrusher, I could cast Crone War. I don't really think casting Innkeeper Bonecrusher makes that much sense. It just doesn't seem like a very good play. I am kind of interested in removing their Innkeeper because they're probably going to cast Lovestruck Beast, and starting them for drawn cards is kind of cool. Crone War made the most sense for me to cast. Some people might be like they cycled Wilt, maybe they have a second, but I think that's fine. I already have 2 Crone Wars in hand, and I don't think it's that likely they have a second Wilt, and even if they do, I think this play is fine because it might be the best play on average, the average scenarios, which means it boosts your win rate on average, and also, even if they have Wilt, it might still even be the best play. Anyway, so yeah, I just was thinking a bit here, so it felt my gut instinct was very much a Crone War, steal their Innkeeper, because then it stops them from drawing a card. I could draw an extra card off my Innkeeper. I can also wipe their 2 creatures away. I have a second Crone War for later, and now I can just kind of wipe the board so I have to do damage control, so I don't take too much damage to be set up to die to an Embercleave later. And yeah, so all these things made sense to me. Obviously, I also have the option to play Kazandu Mammoth tapped, and like, for example, part of the reason the allure to this play is it uses all 4 of my mana. I could also do a play where I go where I play Kazandu Mammoth tapped and play Innkeeper and play Stomp, but even though that uses all my mana, it's not like as powerful as a turn, because Stomp is kind of overcosted. It's not that relevant that I'm playing Innkeeper. In fact, it could even be bad. So yeah, so I choose to play Crone War, steal their Innkeeper. It also means playing a Crone War also means that if they play any creature on their following turn, that creature has the must attack trigger. So any creature they play is going to die to the third each tap creature trigger. Okay, so I play this. I chose not to attack because of I have a lot of ways that I'm generating card advantage, and I wanted to delay the game. I didn't want to trade damage here. In fact, we're basically trading damage because I would be dealing 4 and they would be dealing 3 because I don't really want to block. Of course I could, but I want to give myself maybe the option to draw cards. They could play something like an Embercleave. So then, like, let's say, for example, I know the next turn is. I'm not just saying this because I know it's going to happen, but they might attack, and then I might be like, well, I don't want to block because if they have Embercleave, I don't want to trade my Bonecrusher with Embercleave, because if they Embercleave, I think that's fine. They spend their entire turn doing that. I go to 10 life, and then I can just what I can do is I can next turn use the innkeeper to block this. So I would only go to 5 life, even though they did 2 Embercleave hits, because the Shieldbreaker is a small creature. And then the Embercleave in play is going to be kind of clunky, because this creature is actually going to die. Because they're spending 5 mana to Embercleave this. This creature is actually going to die to the Akroan War in 2 turns. And again, it's going to deal... It's only going to bring me to 5 lives, because I can block here 1 time, and I can take... So I go to 10, and then I go to 5. And then the Embercleave, if they re-equip it, I can Akroan War that creature. So I'm fine if they Embercleave, even though I did no attacks, no blocks. I'm forcing them, even though I did no attacks, no blocks, I'm forcing them to do a play that I'm like very much want them to do. And it makes sense why they do this play, because they don't want to play creatures into Akroan War and so on and so forth. So that's what happens. I untap, I draw Shadow Skull, and yeah. So I decide to play Innkeeper, Bonecrusher, draw 2 cards, and my plan is to chump this. I would go to 5, and I can't attack. Like, it looks kind of weird my Bonecrusher didn't attack, because this is forced to attack. I'm going to block that, and that's my plan. And I thought that was pretty straightforward. Now I finally play the Mammoth. That I didn't play on turn 1. I remember I thought it was kind of cringe here. I was kind of like, checking my seats. So I do the blocks. I got a 5. They play Lovestruck Beast. Their creature dies. They re-equip Embercleave, and now they're just dead. Because, sorry, I think I started the video from the beginning by mistake. 1 second. Let me just make sure this is recording. I'm scared I clicked the button that stopped it. Okay, good, I didn't. So, yeah. So I just had at this turn I just had lethal in a lot of ways. So I don't think I really need to explain it. Like they spend their turn doing that, and then they were just dead on board, basically, because they re-equipped the Embercleave, but their life was low, and then they died. Because I was like, yeah, they re-equipped the Embercleave, I untapped, but I could kill their blocker, play Embercleave, and so on. I sideboarded the same as I do in the second video, and so I would recommend checking that out. I'll put a timestamp in the description when I sideboard, because I explain how I sideboard, but things redundant to explain that again. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So, what's my hand? Can I see my hand before it begins? Yeah, very, very easy to keep. Lovestruck Beast, you love to see it. I have Innkeepers to go with it. I have a Wilt. Fine, I have my lands. Love it. So on turn 1, I kind of have an interesting decision. And I choose to play the Lovestruck Beast token, which I'm not sure is 100% right. I'm not sure if it's right, honestly, because my hand is kind of clogged up. I'm kind of like, I'm on the draw. They have a Lovestruck Beast, so they have some early pressure. I don't really have a way to remove their Lovestruck Beast. I have Will to remove artifacts that would enhance the Lovestruck Beast, and the Lovestruck Beast is just a 5/5. It's not that scary. It's mostly the Great Henge and the Embercleave that go with it. Of course, a 5/5 is just scary, but those are the ways I would really put a cap on. The thing is that they don't really have a good play they could make turn 2, which is part of the reason I went for Heart's Desire, and that's why it's such a strong instinct. Is because think about what plays they can make on turn 2. They can cast Stomp, or they can cast a creature. If they cast a creature, I can Bonecrusher it. And if they cast Stomp, I don't have any targets. That's kind of why I went for Heart's Desire. Like, if they stomp my human, I'm fine with that. Okay, because obviously I have a lot of green spells. I'm kind of stuck on green mana, whatever. I'll just cast that. So anyway, so that's what happens. They offer the trade. Since I had 2 Innkeepers, and I thought this was a good trade to make. Also, again, I don't really have good ways to stop their Lovestruck Beast from attacking me. I was quite happy to make this trade. So, obviously, they chose to attack, so that means they're happy with the trade. That could imply they have more 1/1s or whatever, but in my hand, I felt pretty defensive, and I had multiple Innkeepers, so I could get a lot of card advantage going. So, I don't know. Anyway, so this is kind of interesting. I draw Ooze for a turn. Skips 10 seconds? Wow, this replay is really fast. Okay. Okay, sorry. So, I draw Ooze for a turn. There, okay, sorry. Let me try and get the right. Whatever, I'll just. Okay, so I draw Ooze for a turn, and I have kind of an interesting decision here. The general heuristic would be, well, I don't know if general heuristic, but my opponent pass was 2 mana up. They even played on a red side, though, of course, I guess it's kind of obvious, like, they'd probably just do that anyway. because they probably want a red source if they played a green land on turn 1 with a flip land, and if it doesn't really give my any particular information. So my hand was kind of tight on mana. I had a lot of spells to cast. I even had a second Innkeeper. I didn't have that many adventure creatures, and so I felt like playing Innkeeper is the best play, because I felt like, yeah, if they have Stomp, like obviously if it was face up and they had Stomp, maybe it wouldn't be great if I just play Innkeeper into it. But the thing was, I was kind of tight on mana. Okay, here's the other thing too. It's because next turn they get to cast a Lovestruck Beast. If they just need to play a land, they get to cast a Lovestruck Beast. And basically what that means is my next turn, I have to look what can I cast next turn. Not much. I could cast Lovestruck Beast, but it's not even that good. My hand would be like Ooze, Bonecrusher, Wilt, 2 Innkeepers. I can't really block with it that well. Because, well, I guess I could block with it fine, but it's not like I don't have great henge. It's obviously fine in play, but it's like, it's not a great way setting. Well, I guess it does set me up decently, but so basically I just felt like it's just pretty bad for me if I don't play the Innkeeper. And yeah, sure, I can make them Stomp, but also I'm making them have to have a draw where they have to have Lovestruck plus Bonecrusher, which is there's a pretty good draw to draw both your good adventure creatures and smooth mana to cast them. So I'm forcing them to do that. So that's why I felt fine. Like I was just tight on green mana, and I felt I could only cast so many spells. Like this game might end quickly, and I was tight on the amount of spells. I even, like, if I cast Lovestruck, then it's going to be hard to cast Innkeeper before I cast Bonecrusher. I have a second Innkeeper. I even have this Ooze as an extra mana sink. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons like I'm tight on green mana. So they play that. I draw another Bonecrusher. I play Lovestruck. Not really that complicated. Don't know if anybody would disagree. Draw an Akroan War. They pass. They play El Hengerino. No Ooze, no Ooze. Okay, they have no Ooze. I draw a land, I guess. I couldn't really see there, but yeah. So I draw a land, and now I have a few options, but it's pretty clear that you need some pretty specific reasons to not wilt the henge at this stage in the game where I'm pretty far from killing my opponent. So yeah, I just choose to attack with my Lovestruck Beast, because I'm happy if they trade, and they don't currently have a 1/1, and they didn't try and play a 1/1. I would also thought that I could pass. I think I ended up passing with Stomp Up, but basically I thought that, like, I'm not probably really gonna. Well, I guess I could block technically, but I thought, like, I'd make them have a 1/1. It's like a pretty good attack. Obviously, I could draw a henge myself, but anyway, like, they already played a henge, so this could have been a bad attack, and they could have Vivian, and then I kind of Crone War. It's kind of complicated. My brain is melting. Ugh. But anyway, I thought this was a pretty good attack, because I thought I'd want to trade off most of my Lovestruck Beasts, basically. I also have Scavenging Ooze too, though of course they could have Ooze too. So, well, I guess they can't, because they would have cast it, but they could draw it. I mean, I don't know. So I wilt that, and then I have an interesting option where I can either play Ooze or pass with Stomp Up. So I could play Ooze, and then it's pretty good, because it guarantees I got to use my mana and put a creature in play. Things that could happen when I play Ooze, things my opponent could play. They could play a Shatter Skull for 3 and kill my Ooze and my Innkeeper. That's probably, like, acceptable, because they need to have basically a land plus a Shatter Skull and spend their whole turn casting Shatter Skull. But I don't know. It's like it's not like a disastrous exchange. It's like fine. It's not like I need to play around that. But well, maybe you do, but it doesn't feel like a disaster if they cast it. I still have plenty of gas going on, though maybe I'll start running out sooner. Another thing they could do is they could play Vivian, and if I play Ooze, I felt like I couldn't actually pressure the Vivian well, because basically they would make a 3/3 pass to me, and I could double stomp the Vivian and have this Ooze in play, and they have a 3/3, but then they could, like, cast another henge because they have a 3/3, and they could just play a 6 land. I also felt like if they played a Vivian now, I could stomp it end of turn, and then if I drew a land, I could play the Bonecrusher and draw. I could, like, play a Bonecrusher and draw a card. I also thought that, like, playing Stomp means that if they played anything, I could Stomp, which albeit is not too much stuff, but trying to think this through. Sorry. But I could go, like, Innkeeper, double Bonecrusher, and, like, give myself the out to draw Stomp if it was relevant to Stomp without making it awkward, because, like, if they do play something I want to Stomp, like an Innkeeper or whatever, just whatever, like a Heart's Desire token, anything, then if I cast Ooze now, it's going to be harder to play Innkeeper, Bonecrusher, because I won't have a good opportunity to cast the Stomp. I also thought the Ooze might not be that relevant in play, though obviously spending 2 mana to get a creature in play might be better than doing nothing. They could also play a Akroan War, and then they kind of get to kill both my creatures because they get to steal my Innkeeper, which is kind of annoying because they could draw cards and eat my Ooze and then make my future plays. So basically, I thought it was better to just pass here because of like Vivian, Akroan War, and Shatterskull. But obviously it's not 100%. So they end up Shatterskulling for 1. I guess that actually worked out kind of well for me. Okay. But that's kind of unlucky. Like, that's kind of a bad... that they didn't have a better play, because they could have even just gone Stomp, Bonecrusher, or whatever. But I guess if they stomped it, that's actually funny. If they had Stomp, I could, in response, stomp my own Innkeeper. That's actually kind of sick. I didn't even think about that until right now. But, like, let's say they had Stomp, I could stomp my own Innkeeper, and then they can't play Bonecrusher. This is actually kind of... I haven't seen this play come up a lot. Anyway, I choose to stomp them end of turn because I want to play Innkeeper, Bonecrusher over playing Ooze. I don't know, I thought it was the best to pressure Vivian or whatever, and so on and so forth. If they draw Vivian, draw some spells. And let's see what they do here. I have a lot of spells to cast, so like almost all my draws are good. Lands are good, spells are good. They go for a Akroan War, they steal the Innkeeper. Let's see, so yeah, I just start the turn by attacking, just to see what they do. Yeah, they block. And I remember thinking for a while, like, do I just want to play a creature to like lightning bolt them? Because if I play creature, it just dies to a Akroan War. So I was thinking for a while, like, if I wanted to, I was kind of trying to just do like combat math, like see how the combat's going to play out, what can happen, like could they play a Vivian, stuff like that, blah blah blah. What if they Vivian and spike a 1-drop or have a 1-drop in hand or whatever? But I ended up deciding not to play creature. Obviously, I didn't do all the math. Anyway. So they play Kazandu, Mammoth, and pass. I chose to do nothing. I draw land, pretty good draw because I have a bunch of spells to cast. So it's very good to draw lands. I go forced to attack. Here, okay, so it's kind of interesting. I draw this Great Henge, or I don't draw this Great Henge. I have the ability to cast this Great Henge, and I actually have a very tempting play. So my Bonecrusher is going to die to their Akroan War. So right now, I have, all Great Henge players know this. When you have the Great Henge and you can cast it, you can't always cast the Great Henge. You need a creature in play, and right now I have a creature in play, basically. And I don't actually have that many big creatures. And I could actually go Great Henge, play it, play Ooze. Which is obviously an absurd play. Absurd play. But that could go very wrong, actually, because let's say I play Great Henge, I play Ooze, they wilt my Great Henge, I get my Ooze into play, I'm pretty sure I don't draw a card and get a counter unless I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't. Then they could untap and like play their own Great Henge, and then I could actually be in a pretty bad spot, especially because they can play Great Henge for only 2 mana. So I got kind of freaked out about them playing a Great Henge because I didn't have an answer to it because I had this Mammoth in play. Obviously, I can't really easily remove their Mammoths. Was in my hand? Like, I don't know if I even would want to Akroan War. Like, you want to make consistent play, I mean to say. But I was so much... I decided that I wanted to attack first rather than play Henge because I got kind of freaked out that if they have Wilt... if they had Wilt... Also, this would force them to use the fetch, so yeah, I wasn't... Oh yeah, another reason to do this too is if I play Great Henge and play Ooze, basically they get a block for free. But this way, if they can't block for free because I could have Ember Cleave. Obviously, they could have Wilt, but like I could they would make them. It would mean they have to have Wilt, otherwise, because I'm just representing Ember Cleave, which would incentivize them not to block. Or though, of course, I guess I'm not that likely to cleave, but it would still kill that creature if they block, so it would be fine, I guess. And I could represent having a Stomp. And also I force them to crack their fetch lands, which means they miss a landfall trigger and so on. So yeah, that's why I go to attack first too, because I thought there was a pretty good chance they didn't block. And if basically it's kind of weird because if they didn't block, maybe there's a pretty good chance I play Henge and Ooze. So maybe I would play Akroan War anyway. Well, one thing about Great Henge is it's kind of hard to play around Great Henge if your opponent can be in a good spot to end up just casting it anyway. Like if they have Great Henge in hand, they might be in a good spot to just cast it anyway, because my Akroan War eventually times out. They get it back. Also, if I spend the turn Akroan Warring this, and I'm playing around Wilt, they could just Wilt my Akroan War anyway, so it might not even make sense if I'm playing around Great Henge Wilt. Anyway, so that might have been a bad play, actually. But anyway, I end up stomping their Mammoth, play Ooze, and pass. Yeah, actually it might not make sense, because I started the turn by saying I want to play around Wilt plus Great Henge, and at the same flip of the coin, at the same time, I did, it if I cast a Crone War, it doesn't play around that anyway. But I guess I kind of wanted to get the damage in, and I felt like I was happy if they blocked, even though they kind of have this information about. Even though it's kind of like, how do I say, like, I want to play Great Henge, but I kind of want them to block at the same time, and I only give them the opportunity to block. But also, they don't, like, the damage isn't maybe the most relevant thing, because something that's more relevant is being scared about these Great Henges. So it's kind of like a weird dance. Like, you're not really baiting your opponent into play, because I don't actually know what play might be better for me. But anyway, so I play with ooze and pass. Yeah, and a passing bass, so this seems like kind of had a weak draw. I drew a Shield Breaker, which is nice insurance. I choose to activate now. Why did I do that? Oh yeah, because I wanted to play Innkeeper, Bonecrusher, but I wanted to get an extra damage because that was my plan. Because I don't want to give this. Obviously, they could stall my Innkeeper, but I felt it was better that they don't stall my ooze, even though I have a second ooze. I don't know, because of like Vivian pressure. Okay, anyway, they just had a pretty weak draw this game like that to spend that whole turn casting Shatterskull. Well, they have another Crone War, but this time I can actually wilt it. Which I thought was a good play, because otherwise the Crone War would time lock me, and they could just have instant speed interaction if I try and get too aggressive. So I just do that. They Soul Sear my oozes, I believe. Yep. And I think I cast another ooze. Obviously I have the Great Henge, and I'm kind of running out of cards to play. Oh yeah, I also chose... but... I didn't think that was a huge issue, but maybe it was, I don't know. I choose not to play Shatterskull because I thought if I draw another land, I can just play another land, and I might want to hold Shatterskull, and I couldn't really think of wanting to use all my mana, and I might want to hold it. It was kind of complicated. As you can see, my clock was low, so it might not have worked out. They played 2 Innkeepers, and I breathed a sigh of relief, even though I guess they kept having bad turns, something that I won. I have a lot of options, but I chose the Shatterskull, both of them, so that they don't have a way to like draw out of it somehow, because I just have so much going on. Like, it's hard to imagine an individual card, maybe, except maybe Nox. So yeah, that's the game. There we go.